What's up? It's Book Reviews here for another one. This is the podcast where we discuss all things books. I am Unconditional Surrender Grant, and with me, as always, is the man who burned Atlanta to the ground, Tecumseh William T. Sherman. And we're here to discuss the early days, a little Fort Sumter action with Erik Larson's The Demon of Unrest, a saga of hubris, heartbreak, and heroism at the dawn of the Civil War. Uh, so, I mean, let's get into it. We actually have a couple of things to discuss, things that we wouldn't usually discuss because of a recent traversing you made across the Southeast here, and we'll get to that. But for those of you that don't know, Erik Larson is an absolute OG, wrote The Devil in the
Yeah.
White City and several other classics. This book came out last year, 2024. It's got under 50,000 ratings with a 4.18 out of 5 stars. I read this like 3 months ago. Right? I think.
I can't
And
wait.
then you
Have you read
just
it?
read it.
I don't think you read it this year, though, did you? I think you read it at the end of last year, maybe.
Dude, was it last year? Oh, dude, it was July of last year. Oh, it was a year ago.
Yeah.
Whoa,
You
I'm
read it, I feel like, when it
tripping.
came out, I feel like. Because that hasn't
Yeah, I
been
did.
out, I
'Cause
mean, it's been out, what, 2
yeah.
years?
Yeah, it came out April,
You missed it.
the end of April 2024, and I read it in July.
Okay.
So you're right. I'm an OG. I read it within the first couple months. But yeah, Erik Larson, this is his book about Fort Sumter, Lincoln, as well as the people at Fort Sumter and, all the surrounding parties, secession, all that good stuff. So, I mean, you finished it recently, so it's much more fresh for you, obviously. It's been about a year for me. I can't believe I said a couple months. That's, dude,
I mean, dude,
I'm
time's
not
irrelevant
okay.
these days.
So I rated it a 5 star. I
Good.
absolutely love this book. Erik Larson's one of my favorite authors, and I mean, The Devil in the White City, Splendid in the Vile. These are like 5 star books for me every time, and this might be my favorite book by him, possibly. It's been a while since I've read a Devil in the White City, so I gave it 5 stars. What did you think about it?
So I gave it 5. Which, side note, if anyone who watches our videos, which is a very niche community, but within that niche community, if you use Fable, we had a buddy tell us about that. I did notice on Fable you can rate like quarter, half, like 3/4 stars, which
I
the
noticed that.
fact that Goodreads has not adopted that is insane. But I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, and then in my review I gave it like 4.65. I think this book was
Nice.
great. Which, I mean, I can't tell like if I'm kind of biased because what you were referring to earlier. I went to Charleston this past weekend. I read a lot of this book while I was literally on a beach off of Charleston Harbor, like looking at Fort Sumter. So it was like kind of a surreal thing of
Oh shit.
kind of going back and forth. Yeah. And we did the whole tour of Fort Sumter, Riley and I, and it was awesome. Like, it truly was awesome. But this book definitely, even for someone who, like, I've taught this, which again in school, like, it's a sentence or two. But to
Right.
go into the weeds of this was really cool. I mean, you know how Erik Larson does. I mean, it's just he gets like such good sources, like whether it's diaries or whatever, and he puts like a lot of characters that are really kind of not irrelevant, but they're really just there to kind of set the scene of like what it was like in that time period. And so he just does a really good job of painting the picture of what, especially in the South, I feel like we just forget like what things were like in the South. And I think there's things that are true that we think, but then there's a lot of, I feel like, misconceptions on like how life was lived and how people carried themselves. But yeah, overall, dude, this book was so good. And then it also just kind of like, I don't know, it gives me a huge appreciation for America. I mean, obviously it's a tragedy that we had to go through a civil war. I mean, it needed to be fought. Like, obviously anyone who says the Civil War is fought over states' rights and they don't specify that it's slavery is not, they are
Yeah.
racist. If
Ask them
they're saying that.
states' rights to what? Just ask them that.
Exactly. And this, I mean, it's just this book, which I do feel like Erik Larson, not that even matters, is probably more left leaning than I am, but he does a really good job of just kind of painting these people for who they were, but not necessarily trying to tell you like these are bad people. And I think that's like where,
Mhm.
not that I have appreciation, but it's like, dude, when you look at other civil wars, like we'll probably get into this later, dude, name another civil war that's as not that it was peaceful, but the way it starts is so like it's all about honor and chivalry, and like even Fort Sumter in itself, like no one technically dies in the bombing, and there's like all these interactions where it's like no one does that, like
Right.
no one doesn't want to open the opposing person's mail because that's not honorable. Like they don't care if this is going to the White House, we're opening that. Like
Right.
in another scenario, like I mean, the Red Army and the White Army in Moscow, dude, the bodies are hitting the floor like first thing, which obviously ends up becoming very bloody. You know,
Yeah,
the Civil War,
yeah,
the
it's a very
American Civil War
violent
later.
war, but it started out very,
Yeah,
like, low key.
and they try, and that's
I
what this
mean,
book kind of exposes
low
is
key
that it doesn't just
physically.
happen overnight. Yeah, it takes almost a year before this really ramps up. I mean, because you know you
Yeah,
got Buchanan with where this really starts from, but anyway, they try to settle this peacefully, and I guess that's something that I'm sure is taught, but it was further reinforced to me that they tried every aspect to not have to do this. Um,
yeah.
which you know you can't really say in a lot of other places. So, but yeah, I can't recommend this book more. I mean, I read like honestly the second half of this like in a day, so
Oh, yeah.
I didn't get a lot of time early up, but once I got back, I was ripping through it. But the tour was great too. I'll put some pictures in at the end and like some videos that like I took when I was there. It's very small, but Charleston in general, man, was just beautiful. Like I'd been there once or twice
Mhm,
before, but this is the first time I actually got to like walk around. We did a ghost tour that was pretty fun. Um, but like actually got like a good feel of the city, which is cool because in this book, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit, like a lot of it set in Charleston and like kind of describing what it was like there. And dude, it is kind of like it's our one of our few cities that I feel like America has where you can feel the history. Like when you're walking around, it like
mhm.
feels like like there's something that went on here in the past. Um, whereas a lot of other
Yeah,
cities now are just modern. You know, it's like nothing feels like
yeah,
historically significant. But anyway,
yeah.
yeah, I'm trying
Definitely
to
not in
think
Atlanta
comparing this to
because
other
Sherman burned it
memoirs.
to the ground, so, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Good old Shermy. But I'm trying to think of where I
Um,
would compare this to his other books. For me, because I still need to read The Devil in the White City, but I mean, it's probably my favorite. Dead Wake was the other one that was really good to me because I've only read Dead Wake, and then in in the Garden of the Beast, which for some reason I didn't like that one. I don't know which.
mm,
Ironically, of all the ones that I wouldn't like, you'd think that'd be the one I'd love, but
yeah.
I can't remember why I just didn't
It's on
love
the wrong
one of the
side.
narratives.
The perspective's the wrong side for
Yeah,
you.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
the Allies.
But no, yeah, it was great. Quick read. I mean, this is the way to if you're someone that is nervous about getting into history. I mean, he's one of the guys you got to try out. Especially, I could see where this
Yeah,
being an audible, like I physically read this, but I could see where any of his books audible would probably be really good too.
yeah, and it's definitely a good book just in general for history, but especially if you want anything on the Civil War, I mean, this is how it starts. But to go back to what we were saying, it's a very definitive, uh, depiction of why the Civil War did happen, and
Yeah,
all of the secession, hearings or whatever they called it, meetings where these states were deciding to secede. It's all about slavery. That's the state right
yeah,
that they were fighting for. So don't get me wrong, it was about states' rights, but it was to enforce enslavement. So yeah,
as
it's
a
a
whole,
great
yeah,
book. It's just and Eric Larson has this way, man. Again, even when you're sitting there reading about hearings about secession meetings, you think that could be pretty dry stuff, but Eric Larson just has a way of making everything read like a novel. And he
yeah.
builds up the conflict with Fort Sumter so well, giving you what's his name? I know we have it written down here. Who's the
Anderson,
captain that's there? Yeah,
Anderson,
Anderson. Just giving you so much information about him and kind of his whole how he ended up there, and again the stuff you talked about honor and he was in such a precarious position. This guy is
yeah,
on the precipice of the outbreak of civil war, and he's the guy with really the most power to decide what happens. Like it's not all in his control, but his decision is going to have a huge impact. Every decision he makes once people, states start seceding and people start talking about Sumter, and all that kind of stuff. And then the whole thing with Lincoln coming out is a big part of the avalanche that became the Civil War as well. Is Lincoln being elected. So
Yeah,
he
he's a
ties
wild
that in
card.
there as well. Yeah, because the South, the way they see it is, if Lincoln gets elected, we're going to lose slavery at some
Yeah,
point. So yeah, he just weaves everything together really nicely, and yeah, it was a great book. So I'd recommend it to just about anyone, really, if you're looking to get into this subject or just want to read some history. He's great.
yeah,
Really, any of his books.
they really are. But yeah, specifically like what you said. I mean, this is all just lead up to the war. So if you're like, what is secession? Why did, especially around South Carolina, this really focuses in, obviously, because South Carolina is the leading party, but really looks at what life was like in South Carolina, why these certain people felt this like type of way, and then what people in the North thought about that. And then it also just kind of gives a cool look into like Lincoln before his success. Like Lincoln's not really done anything yet. So like the context that he writes it, it's like it's just so cool because it makes me want to read another book because it's like, how do they think anything good is going to happen? Like with where especially it leaves off, it's like,
Yeah,
man, there's so much, like, because they don't have a crystal ball. We're on the other side now, and obviously it works out, and slavery doesn't exist anymore, and we've progressed like a long way as like Americans. But I mean,
I
it
think a
didn't
lot
look
of it
great.
was,
It did not look great in the beginning. Like there
yeah.
were a
And
lot of
hindsight
times where this
is,
could have gone different.
yeah, and hindsight's always 2020. But I think it also, anyone who really thought that war could be avoided and slavery still kept, um, were kind of in denial, because even when you go back to the founding fathers, like, all of them said it. Thomas Jefferson said it. He was like, "This is gonna have to get figured out someday." And this was a dude
Yeah,
who owned like 600 slaves. Some of them were his biological children.
I mean
So,
Anderson
and
owned
even
slaves.
he,
That
yeah,
was the
yeah,
crazy,
and
there's
yeah,
so many, like, figures in this where it's like, the grand scheme, it is about slavery, but it's crazy how, like, different people have roles that are, like, they just don't even make sense. But, like, there's just this one element that they care about. Like, obviously, again, grand scheme, it is about slavery, but, like, Anderson, he owned slaves, and he was fighting, he just felt this supreme duty of, like, "No, like, I have this role. I cannot, like, it would be dishonorable for me to just give up as a Union like leader to give up this fort to to a state that is saying and disrespecting the role that has been given to me by the power that's been given to me." So like regardless if I agree on the whole
right,
slavery issue with them, like I can't go against like that. Like there's just certain
yeah,
nuances like that are just like what? That's
yeah, because
just
there were a lot of slave owners who, like, slavery was not worth the
yeah.
dismemberment of the Union for them. So, not that that made them any better for having slaves, but people like Anderson were like, "Well, I'd rather lose my slaves than lose the Union." So, and
Yeah.
it's good that a lot of people were like that, because whenever you read about this era, there were a lot of people on the Union side that did not care personally for the
No.
well-being of slaves. So it's a very complicated subject, but we're glad it happened, when it did and not later. So here we
Yeah.
are.
Crazy
Um,
events. But no, I definitely recommend it, especially for anyone who I feel like, dude, just no one reading this book as someone like we care about history. And it's like, dude, I learned so many things. Even I don't want to say like I didn't learn anything super, super surprising, but I know most people do not know anything about this topic. Like about like actual secession and like they know the term slavery, like, oh, it was fought over slavery, but it's like really knowing what actually happened, I feel like is so important. Like knowing what
yeah.
occurred. Um,
And
but
also understanding that they did see it coming for a long time, and that a lot of generations just kind of put it off. Again, Jefferson said it, John Quincy Adams talked about it a lot, especially later in his career. I mean, didn't he die right before the Civil War, right at the beginning? I can't
Quincy,
remember.
I can't
Yeah.
remember either.
He died like on the Senate floor or the House floor, whatever it was. But he
Poor
talked
guy.
about that a lot in his late career. Um, so I say that to say, like, they knew it was coming. Every generation just wanted to avoid it until it hit a boiling point with,
Yeah,
the secession of those states. So, yeah, here we are down in the dirty South, you
yeah.
and I.
All right, so we'll go over just a little bit. We're not gonna do like a super long one, just because I usually need Jesse's help to fully analyze this. But we'll just if you don't want to know anything about this, like, and you just want to go in fresh, because there's a lot of cool things that I say cool, like there's a lot of very interesting things that happen. Um, and you should definitely go read this book. But if you've already read it and you just want to kind of refresher, or if you don't care and you just want to learn, I'll just go over some things that I was just very fascinated about, and then we'll just kind of 10,000 feet up, kind of go over what like more in detail what this book goes over. Um, the first thing that like sticks out to me about this book, and I guess it's like one of those parts of history I just don't really have a ton of knowledge about, but James Buchanan like truly seemed like a terrible president. Like
Yeah,
when they're
one of the
talking
worst.
about like, yeah, like I mean, you probably for sure know more because I haven't read anything specifically about him or where he's a key figure. So this is one of the first books, like especially in the beginning, when Lincoln's been elected president and all this is going down, it takes time for the inauguration. So Buchanan's basically just trying to keep everything together. And it's like, bro, all these people that are just in house, like sabotaging, like people that are a part of his cabinet that are just doing stuff that are giving these seceding states like either federal funds or like munitions or whatever. And it's like Lincoln's just gonna have to come in and figure it out. Like, dude, I just cannot imagine being Abraham Lincoln and becoming president, but then having to wait and then just hearing slowly over time of all these things that are happening. That's just extreme, like
Just
like
very
just handling
counterproductive to
everything.
what he's trying to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just trying to like, all right, I don't want this to happen while I'm in office. I'm just trying to like prolong, 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 like you were saying too. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's Buchanan, man, was just early on so bad, just so bad.
He was
Um,
terrible, and it's also akin to, like, when we read those World War One books, reading about how, people in the Kaiser's cabinet and the Tsarist regime, and even in Britain and France, like, you had all these people that weren't the principal leader, but they were, administration and second and third in line, all that kind of different stuff. And they were just either giving bad intel or withholding information or trying to, stoke the flames. And so you see that a lot with just wars in general, is that there are
yeah.
almost always a handful of people who are just trifling, dude, and trying to get everybody involved in a conflict. Like, truly.
It does make you wonder, like, how does government even work? Like, as I'm reading this, like, I know
Does it
in the
work
end,
in any
yeah. Well,
situation?
Well, I know in the end slavery is gonna be abolished, but it's like I'm like, "Man, how does this happen?" Like, as I'm reading it, I'm like, "It is crazy that it actually happens," because even Lincoln getting elected, it seems kinda sketchy, and there's just all these different players, occurring, and then South Carolina in general, I've lived in South Carolina, and it's just bro, South Carolina is a problem. Like, and people from South Carolina have been problems. And I mean, I will say it was interesting, and then going to Charleston too. But like reading about like their way of life, and I think that's what's tough. And I think us being from the South, I feel like we can talk about it in this light of. I do think this book would be important for someone who is like, man, no, I'm gonna fly the flag because it means something different for me. Like everyone can do what they want, right? Free speech for sure. Like Confederate flag, you can convince yourself it means something different than what it
Right.
meant then. But dude, it's important because man, it's just this disillusion of like there were a lot of positive things I think that you could take away from a southern like planter's lifestyle in a sense of there were certain there's a code that they lived by that is kind of surprising. Like when you read about these different things that they wouldn't do, like to other people. I mean, they did other things like there's bad people everywhere, but for the most part, Beauregard is the guy who ends up like Abner or not Abner PGT Beauregard. He's the Confederate general who ends up like initiating the attack on Sumter, and him and Anderson, like I can't remember what war, maybe some Mexican American war. Anyway, they were like essentially buddies, and dude, there's just all these interactions where they're literally essentially at war, and it's like all these like honorable things where it's like in no other war is a guy like I'd mentioned earlier. There were just they were like sending their mail for them as they're like blockading them off. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, this needs to get sent to the president, and it's like this is secretive information that's just
Right.
they're like, I'm not going to open that. That would be against my honor. But then
Right.
on the flip side, they're like, no, like blacks are inferior. And it's like, what? Like, it's
Right.
just crazy that they
Yeah.
lived in this world where they truly believed that they were doing what was best. And I think it's just when you tell yourself a lie like so many times, you just believe it. And so obviously it's a huge blight, inexcusable, but it's like it's so easy to think like these people were just evil people, and there were evil people for sure, but there were evil Northerners, like you said before too, that didn't care anything about abolishing slavery. So it's like, I don't know, it's just an interesting perspective to see how, like, in certain aspects, like they lived such honorable lives, and then obviously, but they couldn't see, like, I don't know how.
So basically, what you're saying is there's good people on both sides.
Well, yeah, and there's people are flawed, and it's just crazy, like how, I don't know. It's crazy how pent up people got about it, and I think it was because it was the honor thing is what makes it worse. Is what, like, reading this made me realize of like why it was so hard for them to give up slavery, because it was less of like, slavery is bad. It was more like, no, you're doing something that is really bad. You're claiming that you're honorable and you're actually not. Like, that was what it felt like as a call out, and I think that's what,
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was
agree with, but
a
it
huge
makes
hit
it
for
way
them.
worse, and
Well,
that's why
because
they're
they
like, no,
thought,
we're gonna
I
do
mean,
that.
dude, a lot of these Southerners were using the Bible to defend slavery
Yeah,
and saying like that, white people were destined to rule over all other races. They were using the Bible for this argument.
it's
And it's
tough.
like, bro, Jesus was not even white, bro. He was a
Yeah.
brown man, most likely, very
Yeah.
brown. Um, but it's just like it. I mean, for people that grow into it, like there's that added in, like, we've talked about this with different eras of history before, but these people were a product of their time, and that doesn't excuse it. But these people were born and raised in this environment where slavery was not seen as a right or a wrong. It was seen as an institution that was a fact of life, and they didn't
Yeah.
see it. They could not perceive a world without it. At least a lot of them. And a lot of them were really stupid, especially in the South at this time. So that's probably part of the reason as well. That's probably why I'm stupid, because I'm pretty sure my dad sent me a picture like a couple months ago. He found a bunch of old pictures and different things from our family. And we knew this. We just never seen a picture like in uniform. But dude, my like great 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 grand uncle something or another was for sure wearing gray in the Civil War. Yeah,
Oh,
that's all I'll say.
no.
Which brings me back to what you were saying earlier about people like waving a Confederate flag because they think it means something different to
Yeah.
them, or because, oh, well, I had family that died in the Civil War on the Confederate side. And it's like, okay, why do you care? You didn't know them. I saw that picture and I was like, oh, that's cool to see an old picture of one of my ancestors to some degree or another. But it's like, bro, I'm not sad he died. I didn't know him. Like,
No,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? So I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
have a Confederate flag
Which
because
the
of that.
context too, and it's very brief, and you would know way more about this than I would. But at the end, the book kind of goes through, and obviously South Carolina is the first to secede, and then one of the guys, Edmund Ruffian, is like a guy who goes around and tries to help convince like other people to secede, like other states, and he's from Virginia. And so it's this kind of narrative throughout the book about how he's so disappointed in Virginia because they first are deciding not to secede, not to secede, not to secede. And then after
Yeah,
the whole
I
Fort
remember
Sumter
that.
thing, they end up seceding, and he's all happy about it. Well, Robert E. Lee is from Virginia, and Lincoln asked him to be,
Mhm.
the commander of the military. And I can't
The
remember.
Union
I'm
Army,
gray on
yeah.
what exactly happens because it's very brief. So you may be able to like clarify this, but I can't remember if he like either accepts or is like about to accept, and then Virginia secedes. It's but essentially I don't know if it was really about slavery for him. It's like he's like, I just can't fight against my own like statesman. Essentially, it's not like I
Yeah,
couldn't tell because it was this wasn't what this book's narrative was. But do you know anything more about
yeah, I'm pretty
maybe
sure if I
just one of
remember
the ones?
correctly, he accepted and then they seceded and he was like, "I can't fight against my state." There
Yeah,
are, just like anything in history, especially the further and further back you go, there's different schools of thought and opinions based on the evidence we have. There are some people that don't really agree with the line that Robert E. Lee was kind of above all the slavery stuff. I mean, he did have slaves. He does seem to be post-war, like totally bought in and supported the union and encouraged others to do that, which was certainly a good move. But so I don't know what the truth is. It A lot of the evidence seems to suggest that it was about his state, and not fighting against his state of Virginia, which does make sense to a degree in the context of the time, because people, we don't identify, you and I don't identify as Georgians. We live in Georgia, but if someone were to ask where we were from overseas, we would say America. We wouldn't say Georgia, especially Georgia, because that's a country as well. But
yeah,
you get what I'm saying. Back then, it was I'm a Virginian. People didn't say I'm an American. Like, it just wasn't how people thought of. They were Americans, and they knew that, and they were proud of the Union, but it was
Yeah.
about your state. So it makes sense to a degree, but again, at the end of the day, it was slavery, and he knew that. So who knows what the
Yeah.
truth was, but he was ready to fight for the Union against slavery, it seems, until his state seceded. So that does kind of
Yeah.
support that evidence, unless I'm totally butchering that. Um,
But you can tell he was at least he's not a so Ruffian was like, no, you're trying to take away slavery, which is like all right. Like he was someone from Virginia who was
oh
so
yeah,
adamant. They call him, I think,
he was big on slavery for sure.
firebrand. There's like a word they called him,
Fire
like
breathers, firebrands,
something like
something
that.
like
Yeah,
that.
where people
Yeah,
who are just adamant about like, no, this is something that we deserve to
fire
have.
eaters.
Fire eaters. Yeah, you stay out of our thing. So I mean, he clearly wasn't on that. And then Stonewall Jackson's not in this book at all, but he's someone that I ended up writing a thesis paper on when I was in college, because it just didn't make sense to me. Like I had read some books on Stonewall Jackson, like way back in the day in college, and it was just like he did so many things that were like counterintuitive to like what the South as a whole was fighting for. So he's just such an interesting character. So it is interesting though to see these people that ended up being very important figures that weren't necessarily like so far over. You know what I mean? Like they were more
Yeah,
about they were just put in not bad spots. I mean, at the end of the day, they had to sign off on whatever. But I think it's just easy to categorize like, oh, all these people that were fighting for the South under this flag.
yeah.
Oh,
I think
they
there are definitely people that had complicated feelings about it, and I think there's evidence also to show that some people's opinions changed over time. I mean, even Abraham
yeah.
Lincoln himself
Oh,
was a
his
different
for
man and had
sure.
different opinions from the beginning to the end of the Civil War. So, yeah, I mean, it's complicated like all things. I mean, we know how complicated people are today. You know,
Exactly.
things aren't black and white. I mean, that's ironic or punny or what's the word? Because of what we're discussing, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
fault.
No, but this book in general, I'm trying to think of there were some other things that really stuck out to me that I'm sure will come to me, but in general, like what is crazy how fascinating he makes secession, and it's crazy too. That was the other thing. So Lincoln gets into office. I mean, there's so many things that happen, and this is what makes history so much fun. Is like because we're on this side of it, and so we see all these little things that make such a huge difference. And if this one little thing is just a little bit different, how who knows like what would have happened, like as far as how far the Civil War even gets. But first of all, William Seward is one of I think he's Secretary of State for Lincoln. Dude, he's so the way Larson brings him into it and then characterizes him is through a reporter. Like a lot of the things that like I got the most out of. There's this reporter from England. I'm trying to find his name, William Howard Russell, and he comes over and is kind of reporting on what's going on, and he's like baffled with how Seward's like perception of like what Southerners were like was like so like not close, and how a lot of Southerners at least kind of understood what was going on in the North because they would have to travel up there for business or whatever, but not a lot of Northerners traveled south. So there was just this big divide with I mean it's just crazy that Lincoln even was able to make good moves because I feel like a lot of at least with when it comes to Seward where he's just giving him terrible advice. It seems like he gave some good like he would give him his speeches and he would tell him like say this and not that, and like he gave him some really solid lines there, but just his thought process of like how the Confederates just live their lives every day, like that they were just kind of backwater, and it just wasn't how that like life was going on. I mean, Charleston's a very uppity kind of like
Yeah, it was very, like,
ritzy town.
aristocratic still, like, to a
Yeah,
degree.
yeah, it's almost
Like, the
monarchical.
elite,
Yeah.
for
It's
sure.
feudalist in a I mean, basically, it's feudalism where you have
Yeah,
these
and it was
lords.
definitely backwater in some areas, but it was like, there was definitely more poverty in the South, to my understanding, than in the North. Um, but yeah, they definitely had their aristocratic-esque
Oh,
elite in the
huge. I
South.
mean, huge people, though, with extreme wealth. I mean,
Mhm.
just
Well,
because
yeah, because that
they could
yeah, the
victimize
cotton
an entire
production
society.
and yeah, I mean, they had that monopoly on cotton production that made them very
Yeah.
which is the other reason that, you know I mean, that's kind of the driving force of why they wanted to continue to have slavery is because
And
they
it is
wanted to have
that ends up being the
that
other
income.
just the whole cotton is king. Um
Yeah.
line from one of the guys that's in the book. Like I get it, but man, they just had that undying belief, man, that oh, we got caught and so we're good. And it's
Yeah.
like,
They hadn't even heard of polyester. Like, it's like, bro, this game only
but it's like
lasts so long.
you can't eat cotton, bro. You can't make bullets out of cotton. So I don't know
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
think's gonna happen here long term. I get the thought
Like,
process, but
y'all's uniforms will be on point, but other than that,
yeah,
dude, like, what are you gonna do?
exactly. But anyway, Lincoln
Isn't it
though,
crazy
his
too
role in
how in
this.
wars like these, like, rivers are important? Like, I always forget in the Revolutionary
Oh
War and this
yeah,
war, there'll be, like, river stuff going on. It's like, dude, that's crazy. Like, you know what I mean? I don't
oh,
know
river
why, but
warfare.
whenever there's river stuff going on, I'm just like, dude, utilizing the land and all its contours, I like it.
I mean, just
I don't know, dude.
imagining he does talk about how, especially the Ruffin guy, he like just travels all over to try and get to places, dude, and it just sounds miserable, bro. Traveling back then had to be
Dude, it's
so bad. Even on trains, it just
dude,
sounds terrible. It's like,
yeah, I
ugh,
mean, minus the trains, like, unless you're going by train, it reminds me of literally, uh, the eye of the world. It's like, dude, these guys
yeah,
are all mad, just traveling in absolute ludicrous
just
conditions.
pissed.
Like, when they talk about
Yeah,
riding in carriages, it's like, bro, they don't have asphalt. So, like, you're in a
no.
carriage a lot. Like, obviously, they have packed dirt roads in, like, you know, area like sit villages or
Yeah.
whatever. But if you're traveling,
They also
like, between
they don't have
villages, like,
suspension either on those carriages.
dude,
So I mean,
imagine being
you're
sick,
feeling it.
dude, and having to take a carriage ride.
Well, the thing too that I was talking to Riley about is when you go to Charleston, it's really cool feature, but like all their like a lot of their roads in the older districts are cobblestone. And I'm like,
Like, that's not
cobblestone
even
with
good on a car, bro.
I
Like, on a
know,
carriage with
dude,
no
you're feeling
suspension, like,
oh god.
dude.
Like I think it'd be better if this was dirt. I guess the cobblestone's better because it's not muddy. I guess it's like more of a cleanliness thing. But
Yeah,
man,
they're avoiding,
yeah,
yeah,
there's
just getting
certain things
stuck
that
in
are
the
just
mud.
wild. But this was kind of my first. I know you've read a bunch of stuff on Lincoln. It may like normally I'm reading mostly European history. This book did kind of get me like back a little bit to where I'm like because I
Yeah.
know like broad stuff about a lot of these characters, but like really getting into the weeds is so much fun,
Dude, you're gonna
especially
text me later
Lincoln,
and be
bro.
like, "Dude, I just ordered this book on Jefferson Davis. I really wanna get into his head."
Jefferson. Oh man, but just how he's characterized Lincoln that is in this book is just you can tell he's one of those guys, man. Like where he's the right place, right time, having the right guy. Where
That's
even the
honestly
little you
the
get of
best
him,
description of Lincoln is he's just one of those guys. Like,
well, it's like every time in history, you either have a James Buchanan step up to the plate, and you're like, oh god,
"Oh, no, we're
and
done."
nothing good happens, or you have a Lincoln step up to plate, and it's like, all right. He just figured it
Right.
out, man, and it's like it's so impressive, especially because of the context that Larson gives. It's like, man, the South had a lot of momentum, man. Like as far as a lot of states were seceding, and again, at this
Yeah, dude, it
point,
was getting sketchy, bro. Lincoln was like, "What am I the president of exactly?"
yeah, and he just gets handed this. He has nothing like, and
Yeah,
who do you trust? Like, I mean,
yeah.
you still had a
Tough
lot of
spot.
people that were not great. The thing that ends up happening too, the break in like communication and that I was wanting to talk about too is, bro, Anderson had like no idea what was going on. Like this whole time, bro.
Yeah, dude.
They shafted Anderson. Like Lincoln and crew, like gave him no word of like, are we retreating? Or am I going to get
I mean, dude,
reinforced?
at one point, Lincoln's like, "So how long exactly can you go on the food you have if you
Yeah.
eat as little as
He
possible?
says that a
Because it's gonna
couple
be
times.
tough to get food in there." Yeah,
Yeah.
and then
And
he's
that
like, "Alright,
guy,
we'll probably have it around this time." And then that time passes, and he's like, "Look, so it's gonna be a little while longer. I know you said by this date you'd run out of food. You haven't ran out yet, have you? Like, because that
well,
would
he
be
keeps
tough."
it's like he's just disregarded. Everything he says is disregarded, Anderson, that is. Like, he'll send a thing
Yeah.
saying, like, "Look, I mean, we're fully surrounded now. Like, they've been putting in work in this harbor, and
Yeah.
no one's getting to us. So, like, why are you trying to tell us that you're gonna try and get someone in here? I'm telling you, we
Yeah.
need 30,000 men." And then Larson will be like, "That's half the size of like the U.S. Army," or like something crazy
Yeah.
sad of like,
Well, and
"All right,
that's
they
the
don't
thing
have
is
enough
there's all
guys."
these political, like, different factors that play, like, they don't have a standing army that can really make that happen. Lincoln doesn't wanna send food or any reinforcements because it's gonna be seen as, like, an act, progressing
Yeah.
towards war. So it's like all these, diplomatic, political tensions, and then meanwhile, Anderson's just in this fort getting surrounded with no food. And
No
all
food,
are
dude.
like, "Yo, Cap." What we
Yeah.
doing?
Well,
Because
and you
they're
feel
leaving
bad.
guns across the ocean.
Well, and dude, there's the one guy, Doubleday, Abner Doubleday, dude. He is like, so he's underneath Anderson and at all times, like, because there's like a couple of times where someone like accidentally fires a cannon and it hits into the wall of Sumter, and they're like, wait, what? Because like all this is going on, but there's still that honor code of like, we're technically not at war. So like, you're not
Right.
going to fire on us. We're not going to fire on you. That kind
And
of
I
thing.
guess
So
we
this
kind of
bullet
failed
hits.
to
It's like,
say, like, it's kind of, moot point at this point in the discussion, but like the whole reason for this is because it's a Union fort in a state
yeah,
that's seceding. Like, so that's where the tension resides,
it's a
which is just this
it's
whole
federal property technically. So
yeah,
yeah,
so it's this whole back and forth where Lincoln's like, they're saying you need to evacuate, and he's like, they're saying you need to evacuate our fort, and he was like, "What do you mean our fort? Like that is my fort. You seceding is not real, bro." Like he's literally basically telling them, like, "Bro, you cannot. What you're doing doesn't exist. You're not seceding. You're just rebelling." you know.
and we're
So
definitely
it's
not
kind of
leaving
disrespectful,
someplace that was
honestly.
funded by federal funds and not state funds, and
Right?
is
Yeah.
you know So, but Anderson in general, man, they get shot on that one time, and instead of shooting back, Doubleday's like, "All right, we got to start firing now." And he's like, "No, like there's no way that was like meant to happen." And then, lo and behold, couple minutes, like 30, 40 minutes later, a boat comes up. Hey guys, we're so sorry. Like we were
Yeah.
practicing, something happened.
We were just
Thank you
siding
guys for
in for
having
if we
honor.
do have to
Yeah,
attack you, but we didn't mean to do that.
so they didn't know though. So Anderson was sneaky about some stuff. Like they roll up and like, so did that hit by the way? And it did. And he's like, no, it was it was like probably 60 feet over us. But it was pretty
yeah.
close. So that they would know because he's like, man, if they make one
Yeah.
adjustment, that's destroying our door.
Yeah. He's trying to
But it was just
mislead them.
this
Yeah.
honor code because like they were being real, like, hey,
That
thank
was
you
not
for not
honorable though,
firing.
bro. He capped.
What, lying? But it's just
Yeah.
honorable the fact that they show up on a boat and they're like, "Thank you for not firing." That was like like
Yeah.
anyway. And then Anderson in general, like he's so well respected by all the Charlestonians. It's just interesting. Like it's
Charlestonians.
so wild that they are very not supportive of him, but they allow him to leave in a cool fashion. But the whole way the fort even gets surrendered is crazy. Like the guy that comes from DC to scout out, he goes and visits Anderson, is allowed to go visit him in Fort Sumter. Anderson's like, bro, there's no way y'all are getting to us unless you have an absolute army. And this guy's like crazy, thinks like, no, pitch black, dark and night, we can get some guys here on this spot. And he's like, okay. But I'm telling you, there's like a perch over there where they're just gonna kill you guys. So like whatever. So he goes back to Lincoln and it's like, yeah, we got this. And so he accidentally sends two groups to like the same boat or something. There's some mix up with a certain boat, and the guy doesn't realize it. And so they send off this fleet, and half the fleet, because it was so secretive, didn't know what their mission was until they were out at sea. And so once they get out at sea, they realize, oh, we're going to Fort Sumter and not to like some other just
Fiji.
to drop. Yeah, they were like they thought they were like merchant ships, finding out that
Yeah.
oh wait, you've been summoned to you're now Marines, and they're like, wait,
You're now in
what?
a
We don't
game of
want to do that.
Battleship.
Exactly. And so they show up in Charleston, and I mean they don't have the guys to do anything, and so they're just sitting on the periphery, and that's when the firing starts happening too. But the whole reason though, which was wild, that Fort Sumter even surrenders the way it does is there's a general from Moultrie, which is where I was. So there's another fort where they start off in, and like at the beginning of this book, Anderson and crew starts off in Fort Moultrie. Well, that's like on the beach in Charleston, but it's obviously not. It's built to protect from invasion from the harbor. So like behind it, where like people actually live, is not like fortified. So like they could easily get overrun. So he's like, all right, things are getting sketchy. We got to move to Sumter. That's like the best place to stand down. And so anyway, we're there. There's like a beach right there, and that's where we were reading when Riley sent that picture, which I'll put up because it's kind of funny. You can tell I'm just fried from the day before.
Dude, my
Um,
boy's never heard of
but
sunscreen. How did Riley like the book?
she never finished. But I would like to disclaimer: I'm proud that she got as far as she did. Some things are just
Just
built for the
wasn't
men in this
wasn't for
world.
her. I mean, what are you gonna do?
Now, which I
You know?
think, the pressure amounted. I mean, she's a Frida McFadden girl, and that's just a big difference.
Yeah,
But I think
for
she
sure.
decently liked it. It gave her enough context when we took the tour that she had something to go with.
Nice.
But
That's all
anyway,
that
but the
matters.
way that he even surrenders is insane because there's a guy from Fort Moultrie that just takes it upon himself because there's a fire that goes on because the firing's now happening as far as like cannonballs are being shot both ways. And it looks like the flag, the American flag, falls, which is like, I guess, a sign that, hey, we're surrendering. And so from the Moultrie side, they couldn't see that they had reattached the flag, and it because of the smoke from the inside of Fort Sumter was burning. So him and another dude like row out there to like see if they've seceded or not, or seceded that they've surrendered. And they once they get close enough, they see like, oh wait, like no, there's still another flag, but now they're like almost there. And so he
Yeah.
just makes a big call of like, we're just going to go and give them terms to surrender by, but he doesn't have the authority to do that. This guy doesn't. He just like
It's
seizes
like,
the
bro,
moment.
we're
He
too
wants the
far.
glory.
Like,
And
yeah.
so he shows up, does that whole thing. And so they surrender. And then another ship from like the actual other side where I guess Beauregard and other people are at, they're like, oh, so you guys surrender? He's like, yeah, we agreed to those terms that guy just had. And then he realizes, oh, we've been bamboozled. And Anderson was pissed, dude, because it
Yeah.
was just seen as a very unhonorable thing. And then even I can't remember if it's Beauregard or whoever, they're also disappointed in this other guy because like it's just crazy how like there's just this honor code. They want to win by a
Yeah.
certain way. Like winning isn't enough. They have to win in a certain way. But you know, it's an eye opening book. It definitely makes me want. I'll put it up to the that Shelby Foote series, bro. At that bookshop was beautiful, dude. I don't know if it was a
Mhm.
first edition or not, but it was in such good like condition. The books themselves, but it was like $250 for the three. I was
That's
like,
too much.
dude, we spent a lot of money in Charleston too. I'll tell you, that's the one thing, man. The Charleston in general is so expensive, but it was beautiful. But anyway, this book's good. I think. I mean, I feel like this is an Nitsla Book Reviews recommended book. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would definitely say you should check it out, especially if you want to read about the Civil War. But it's just a great read in general. Even if it's one of those books where even if you're not into history or this subject, like you could most likely still find enjoyment from it if you enjoy reading.
Yeah.
I would think so. Yeah, it's Lit Book Reviews certified The Demon of Unrest by Erik Larson. We'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys, and I'll have like some pictures at the end here with a little bit of music, maybe 30, 60 seconds of a good old Charleston visit.
30,
So you guys,
60, 120 pictures.
something like that. So y'all enjoy. Have a great rest of your day.